Hey girls, and welcome to the Lean Girl YouTube channel. Today I am so excited to bring you another Lean Girl interview, interviewing an expert on a topic as it relates to women's health and of course getting lean while living our best lives. So today's interview is going to be a really special one because it is probably the most asked about topic from my entire community. And as you know, we have already done 2 interviews. We've done one all about gut health and the other one was on mindset. And those 2 were definitely the warm up for this one because, as I said, it has been asked by so many of you, and I know that so many of you are struggling when it comes to managing your hormones. A lot of you are struggling with PCOS. So today we have the wonderful Cory here, who is the women's dietitian. I will put up her Instagram here. You have to follow her. She has the most incredible content that I think will support everything that we go through here in the interview, and I'm sure give you even more. So a huge welcome, Cory. It is so awesome to have you here on the channel, and I cannot wait to start picking your brain on all things PCOS and hormones.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It's so amazing to hear that this has been such a requested topic. I know a lot of women struggle with PCOS, myself included. So there's definitely a lot to talk about, and I'm really excited to dive in. So thank you for having me.
Awesome. So yes, Cory is a registered dietitian, and as she mentioned, she has also suffered with PCOS and has now really channeled down into helping specifically and merging the two of nutrition as well as hormones and PCOS. And I think that's really uncommon. I feel like it's always difficult to find who to go to, because there's kind of like the herbal people or there's the dietitians that don't know much about hormones. So it's so fab to have someone that can talk to both topics, and really, I guess, as someone who suffers with PCOS, to really talk about it on a level that you understand from being there yourself. So thank you so much, and I'm so excited to dive in and really just look at some practical ways that we can improve our hormones, to handle PCOS and the symptoms that go alongside that. And of course, my topic and what I'm passionate about is fat loss, getting lean, and in a way that is sustainable and enjoyable, and it allows us to be lean and healthy and vibrant and be able to show up as our best. When it comes to hormones, we know that this impacts us a lot and impacts our ability to lose fat. But I guess this word, like hormones, it's like the Loch Ness monster. Whenever people talk about it, it's like, I can't lose weight because hormones. Like, you don't even ask other questions. You're like, okay, we don't even know what that means, but it's like the unknown, So perhaps you can, before we even get into all of the juice, you can just explain where it is that you got interested in the topic, how it is that you got into it. I always find people's stories so fascinating. So maybe you can just give us a quick insight on how we got here.
Yeah, definitely. So I am a dietitian, and when I became one, I knew that I wanted to open my own practice, but I didn't know what I wanted to specialize in. And like a lot of women with PCOS, you go to I went to the doctor and I needed help with managing my condition, and we're either offered the birth control pill, or we're told to lose weight, but we're not given any direction on how to do that. Or we're told just to come back when we're pregnant. And in my opinion, that's not good enough for us, and we need more. So when I was thinking about what to specialize in, I thought, okay, no matter what, I'm not going to specialize in PCOS. Way too complex, way too complicated, way too much going on there. I'm never going to touch that. And then I did, because I do have PCOS, like we mentioned. And because I'm a dietitian, I felt like I was in this unique spot to really fill in the gaps between, the lack of care, because there's such a huge connection between PCOS and nutrition. So I worked in some women's clinics. I worked alongside some really talented, amazing OBGYNs. So I had, field experience. And then I just did a lot of my own research, and I have PCOS too. So I have a personal kind of connection to this. And I just kind of brought everything together. In graduate school, I focused a lot on women's health and hormones and nutrition for that. So I did feel like I was sort of, at the end of the day, I felt like, okay, I actually am the right person to be kind of an advocate for PCOS and also teach women how to manage this condition better. So that's in a nutshell, how I kind of fell into it. And I love it. And I would never turn back if I could. I love it.
Oh, my word. And what also fascinates me is there's always so much new stuff that's coming out, right? There's so much new research on it. So the topic just keeps on expanding. But I guess with that also becomes a lot of misinformation, which is why I'm so happy to have you here. And guys, we also just have to have a moment that Cory had a baby 7 weeks ago, and she's here. She made it on this call at 9 a.m. in the morning. So just, thank you so much for making the time. I know that the girls are going to get so much value out of this. So let's get straight into it. And I guess the first question is if you suspect that you have PCOS or have some kind of hormone imbalance, what would be the common things that we should look out for if we haven't yet been diagnosed with PCOS?
So first and foremost, some symptoms you can look for are basically signs of elevated androgens, which are male sex hormones. And that could be facial or body hair growth. It could be hair loss on the head. It could be acne, difficulty losing weight. Irregular periods is another big one. So typically a period will come, once a month and will last anywhere from about 3 to 7 days. So if you're noticing irregularities there, that's a big tip off for PCOS. So that's another one. And then when we go to the doctors and we get blood work done, if we have elevated testosterone, there's a couple other hormones that can definitely point to PCOS. And then if you get a ultrasound on your, basically a pelvic ultrasound, then they see little tiny cysts on your ovaries, then that's very, indicative of PCOS. And I do want to just kind of elaborate on that because there's a lot of confusion about the word cyst. These are not the same cysts that, you hear about women like, oh, I had a grapefruit sized cyst and it burst and I was in agony. This is not the same thing. You can have both, but the cysts that are associated with PCOS are actually just small immature follicles that are kind of competing for ovulation and nobody's winning. That's how I describe it. So that really plays into the whole irregular periods, which is really just a result of us not ovulating on time regularly, like most women do. So that's another thing that you can ask for, at the doctors if you do notice some of those symptoms that I mentioned earlier.
Yes, because that's actually funny that you mentioned that because that's how I found out that I had PCOS is I actually went to the gynae and thinking back, she probably wasn't best because she was like, I see some cysts here, but they're okay. And then I went away. I'm like, why are there cysts? And I'm like, what is wrong with me? And I, in the time, she was like, no, nothing to worry about. But obviously, she didn't elaborate too much on what that actually meant. But funny that, and thanks for that explanation because I think always things are like in your head, they seem much scarier. It's like Dr. Google.
I know.
Dr. Google.
I know.
So, Cory, I have quite a few questions here. So I'm going to try and get through the most of them. So when we talk about a hormone imbalance, and I guess not just PCOS, but perhaps just hormones that would impact our ability to get lean or, lose fat. It always seems like, we say that it's our hormones that are impacting us. And I genuinely believe that our hormones do play a role in that. And I'd love to get your view on how much of a role that does play. But I'm also always cautious to, blame or put blame on certain things, which almost takes our power away to be like, okay, well, it's my hormones, so I can't do anything. So what is your view on the relationship between hormones and fat loss and how much of a role do they really play in that?
Yeah, it's a great question. With PCOS, I don't think you can achieve what you really want to when it comes to weight loss without addressing your hormones at the same time, because there is a connection. So some of the key hormones that are involved with weight and PCOS, the first one would be insulin. And even if we don't have classic insulin resistance, right? Like we haven't been diagnosed with that, blood sugar regulation is so key for us because blood sugar imbalance can contribute to elevated androgens. So when our blood sugar, so our insulin, all this stuff is kind of out of whack, it stimulates our ovaries to pump out more androgens. And those androgens, like testosterone, make our symptoms worse and they make it harder for us to lose weight effectively. So, insulin is a big one. Another big one would be cortisol. Cortisol is our stress hormone.
Yes.
And cortisol, when it's elevated, can make our body want to hold on to weight and not let it go. So that's another big one. So there's a huge stress and PCOS connection as well. And then another one would be testosterone, because that testosterone, that androgen, it's a male sex hormone. Women have testosterone just in the same way that men have estrogen. We just typically have them in smaller amounts.
Yes.
So with PCOS, if we do have that elevation in testosterone, it can absolutely make it harder for us to lose weight the way that we want to. So I find it's most helpful to address, of course, you have to be in a calorie deficit in order to lose weight. We know this.
Yes.
But it's also imperative to address those hormones at the same time and really being mindful of what our blood sugar is doing, because it could even affect our cortisol. It can affect our testosterone. All of these things are kind of connected. And that's, another reason why I do talk a lot about stress in my practice too, and how to integrate stress management into your care plan to help you lose weight faster and take care of that cortisol piece.
I think that that's a big one that a lot of people just overlook. They look at the nutrition and the exercise, and we don't talk about stress enough, and sleep as well, which I'm sure is something that you also link in with managing and balancing hormones.
Right. And not just from, the physiological aspects of that, but also just from a lifestyle standpoint. If we're stressed and we're not sleeping well, what are we going to do? We're not going to prioritize, super healthy foods and, that calorie deficit and working out. And it's all connected. We're going to sleep in, we're going to reach for the more convenient items when it comes to food. We're not going to be cooking as much. So it's all everything can be kind of culminate in this inability to lose weight the way that we want to.
I think that that's actually a really good point. And something that I also try and highlight is that I guess when it comes to hormones, it is because it impacts our behaviors as well. It's not like I'm eating perfect. It's not like I'm eating perfectly. I'm definitely in a calorie deficit. I'm this and this and this, and I still can't lose weight. Most of the time, it's more the other way around. It's like all of these things are impacting my daily habits, and that is more commonly the reason.
True. Yep. Exactly. I agree. Yeah.
And then in terms of knowing where we are hormonally, is there a real way to know? Is there a test that you can do? I'd love your insight on that.
Yeah. So there's no one PCOS test, unfortunately. I hope that one day comes into fruition, but you can ask your doctor for a full hormone panel. And that includes estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, thyroid stimulating hormone, FSH, which is follicle stimulating hormone, LH, which is luteinizing hormone, a range of other things. But all of those can be helpful as far as seeing what's happening with your hormones and how that might be impacting your PCOS. You can also get a pelvic ultrasound to see those if there are those cysts. That would be kind of where I would start. And I do recommend, even if you've already been diagnosed with PCOS, to get some lab work done at least once a year to see where you are. And you would also want to get your blood sugars looked at. So that would be a fasting, here in the US, it's fasting insulin, fasting glucose, and an A1C check. And that will tell you what's happening blood sugar wise. So that's another good thing to kind of keep tabs on.
I think what's nice about that is what I always say to the girls is what gets measured gets improved, right? So then also, if you do start implementing new habits or trying to make some lifestyle changes, you can actually see if that's making a difference or not. But yeah, if you don't know where you're at, then
I love that. What gets measured gets improved. That's an awesome way to put that. Yes, agreed.
Fab. And so what other factors would you say are impacting our hormones? And obviously nutrition is going to be a huge one that maybe we can start unpacking, because I know that that's something that you're super passionate about, and your content is just amazing with all of your fab recipes and that. And if you have not yet gone to check out Cory's Instagram, right now. You can pause the interview and you can go and check her out because she has so much fab stuff there. So yeah, let's get into it. Nutrition and hormones, like how are they linked? How should we be making better choices if we are PCOS sufferers? And yeah, I guess we can go straight into the myths, because if you tell me that I can't eat my oats, Cory, I will be very sad.
So let's get into we'll cover the big basics and the three hormones that we just mentioned when it comes to what's impacting PCOS and weight loss are all influenced by what we're eating, believe it or not. So insulin, of course, that's a big one. We've all heard of insulin resistance and diabetes. Of course, that has a direct tie to nutrition. But what a lot of us don't realize is the connection between nutrition and our androgens as women and our cortisol. So it all comes back to blood sugar balance. And I talk a lot about blood sugar balance. It's a very unsexy topic, but it is a really, really big one to pay attention to when we have PCOS, because it's so critical when we're talking about nutrition and helping to manage PCOS. So we really are focusing on a protein, fiber, and fat-rich diet, and we're focusing less on carbs, but we're not eliminating them completely. Okay. The reason why we're not going keto and eliminating carbs, there's many reasons. There's lots of good fiber in carbs if we're picking the right ones. So I always recommend complex carbs, which is basically where they include some fiber. So if you think about the difference between white rice and brown rice has that fiber content. So what that does is it slows the glucose spike. So when we eat white rice, our blood sugar bumps up. When we eat brown rice, it goes up, but then the fiber kind of squashes it back down. And when we're talking about blood sugar and PCOS, we're really wanting it to just kind of be this straight, steady Eddie line. We don't want these big peaks and valleys, and we don't want it all over the place, because that's going to exacerbate our PCOS. So we're managing that. We're not eliminating carbs. We're including the right ones, and we're just doing less of them. The other thing about elimination is it always leads to deprivation, and then we get into this kind of restrict and binge cycle. And we see a lot of prevalence of eating disorders in PCOS. So we want to stay away from that, and we want to really come at this because PCOS is a chronic, lifelong condition. There is no cure, but it can be managed. So we really want to pick something that's sustainable in the long run. Mm-hmm. So including a small amount of carbs in your meals is a great idea, and you can still balance your blood sugar effectively without completely taking them out. Mm-hmm. So yes, you can have oats. Yes, you can have bread.
I'm glad to hear that. Is that also in terms of balancing your blood sugar when you're having, for example, a macro balanced meal? So if you're including carbs and protein and fats all together, that would help to stabilize your blood sugar. So for example, if you were having oats, to add in some protein powder and some nut butter and then maybe some fruit. So we're having a more balanced.
Exactly. Correct. Yeah. So what I would recommend for the carbs is picking a complex carb. Oats have a lot of fiber. They would be considered a complex carb, and add a protein to that. So the way that I make my 2.5-year-old's bowl of oatmeal is she refuses all the additions. She wants sugar, like brown sugar for oatmeal, and that's all she wants. So I let her have that. I would not eat that. I would add protein powder, some basically a zero, like a low glycemic index or 0 calorie, 0 blood sugar impact sweetener like allulose or stevia or monk fruit. And then I would add some nut butter to kind of round everything out. So that bowl of oats is going to be so much more supportive of my PCOS, my blood sugar, than just the oats with the brown sugar and maybe fruit, because fruit, even though fruit is very healthy for us, it still does have some natural sugar. So we're kind of adding sugar onto carb. So I'm not a huge fan of adding a ton of fruit to the oats. We really want to kind of add that protein and add that fat in.
More the protein. Mm-hmm. Awesome.
I would tweak that.
You would tweak that. And so, Cory, then in terms of the two that always people are like, eliminate the dairy and the gluten, is it BS? Oh, is it true?
Yeah. It is 100% BS. And the reason it's become really popular because it's an easy thing to preach, right? It's like a very black and white, clear cut, just take this out and you'll be good to go. That whenever you hear something like that in nutrition, that's always a red flag, because nutrition is so complex and nuanced, and we can't just eliminate something and fix all of our problems. So a lot of times, just like we talked about kind of the lifestyle and the hormone connection, with gluten and dairy, when we take gluten and dairy out, at least here in the US, gluten and dairy is in like everything.
Right.
And if we go out to eat, all of a sudden our choices on the menu drop from like everything to like one or two. And we're usually
We'll have a
stuck with
chicken
salad
breast with some salad.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So of course that's a lower carb, lower calorie meal. So that's going to get us much farther, when we're talking about blood sugar and PCOS. And that's, when we eliminate those things, we eliminate a lot of the higher calorie foods out there. And a lot of the, I don't like the word processed foods, but a lot of the more like pre-packaged foods,
Right.
chips, cookies, pastries, all of those are suddenly off the table.
Yes.
And the second part of why that can be successful is because all of a sudden we're being conscious of what we're eating, right? We're looking at nutrition labels and ingredients, and we're seeing, is there gluten in there? Is there dairy? We haven't been doing that before.
Right.
So that is always going to benefit us when we're talking about nutrition and weight loss. So I find that you don't have to eliminate gluten and dairy. You can still incorporate the other things that we just mentioned in without having to remove and restrict things. Because when we eliminate those things, we're not coming at this from a place of moderation and balance, and it's not as sustainable. So I always preach, of course, I would never recommend eating gluten 3 times a day, every single day, 3 servings every meal. But you can totally incorporate some in, if you do a piece of whole grain bread, or you do Greek yogurt is a great one. You can totally add those in.
I love that, because that's totally my approach as well. It's like, are you just looking for things to cut out? We like, the more inclusive you are, the more sustainable it is, and the more freedom you have to make choices. And again, you don't feel restricted, so you don't, have this diet binge restrict kind of thing, which so many of us, that is literally the biggest downfall of all time. So if you feel like you have that freedom, you can just enjoy everything in moderation. So I'm really glad to hear that, because I think for a lot of my girls as well, like, they all of a sudden like, oh my word, this is amazing. I can now, within my calorie budget and making sure I have my protein and all of this, I can really have whatever I want. And then someone's like, wait, you have PCOS, honey. No gluten, no dairy, no this. And I'm like, oh no, she just found this freedom and now it's been taken away. So I'm really glad to hear that.
Yes. Yeah. And weight loss is hard enough, right? Like, it's hard, and PCOS is hard. So both of them, so tough. And then to add on, you can't have this. I mean, my gosh, like, how do we live? I cannot, I do not, I could never go that route for very long. So yeah, I'm very much from in your camp from that point of view.
And in terms of other like big myths around PCOS, like, obviously, I mean, I have PCOS and I've obviously had a weight loss journey. So it's definitely not impossible to lose fat if you have PCOS, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So 100%. You can lose weight. It may just be a little bit more challenging, and you have to maybe take a few more factors into consideration. For example, the blood sugar. The blood sugar. Right.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. So my next question, are there any foods that truly do have a negative impact on PCOS, which I guess you've basically answered? The more the processed foods, the ones that are going to spike our insulin and impact our blood sugar in a negative way. Those would really be the only foods that you would want to not eliminate, but just have less of.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So there's no one food that's off limits. It's really about how much and when. So if it's something like something that's really going to spike our blood sugar, like a chocolate chip cookie, right? Like, we can if we think about it, we can still have that, but we want to make sure that we're not doing that all the time. And, maybe we're adding something along with it to kind of slow the blood sugar spike. But really, it's just kind of that moderation is everything. So there's no one food that we can't have. It's just, how much of it. Let's make sure we're not doing it all the time. And what can we potentially pair with it to kind of slow that blood sugar spike to support our hormones?
I like that. I like that approach. And then one more thing, kind of in a link to this, is intermittent fasting. So intermittent fasting is actually something that I did for a really long time, and I actually I no longer do. I don't know. I really enjoyed it for a time, and I think it definitely helps you to maintain a calorie deficit if you are trying to lose fat. And now I'm kind of more in a maintenance phase, so I no longer do it. And now breakfast is like my favorite. So, but in terms of hormones, in terms of hormones, does that play a role? Does it negatively impact us if we are doing intermittent fasting?
Yeah, I think it's everyone has to find what works best for them. And from what I find, it actually blood sugar regulation and keeping it stable is more effective than intermittent fasting. And actually, the majority of the research done on intermittent fasting is done on men. So it's kind of frustrating because women are not small men and we're so different. We have so many different hormones happening, right? So I find that it's actually much more sustainable to work more on regular meals and snacks than trying to fit everything inside like a eating window, just kind of from a feasibility standpoint. And also, talking about the science behind it, that blood sugar regulation again is harder to do when we're intermittent fasting, and it's much easier to do when we're doing regular protein-rich meals and protein-rich snacks. So that's what I find to be most effective in my practice. But again, if intermittent fasting works for you and that's your jam and it's, everything looks good, then I'm never going to tell you to stop. But typically from my approach, I go for more kind of, regular meals and snacks to keep that blood sugar steady.
Balanced meals. Okay, awesome. Okay, and then perhaps we can also just get into a little bit around vitamins and supplements. So I do see a lot of things coming up now with hormonal supplements and various things that you can now take. And I know that in terms of the weight loss space, there are always so many new things popping up, and it's hard to also tell, like, is this legit? Is this something I should be taking? Or my approach is always like nutrition and exercise will do 95%. So rather spend your money on that if need be. But I know that supplements can certainly play a role. So I would love your insight on that.
Totally. So supplements are one piece of the puzzle, and they are an important piece for PCOS because there's lots that we can do supplement wise to kind of fill in the gaps. But I will say one of the things that I see commonly is I'll see somebody, they'll message me on Instagram and they'll say, I have PCOS, I really need to lose 40 pounds. Which supplements of yours should I take? And I'm happy to answer that, but I always explain to them, weight loss is not just going to come from a supplement. You've got to integrate in some of the other, nutrition and movement and stress and all of these other things. So I will just kind of preface it with that. But there are different supplements that can be helpful. If you do have elevated androgens, there are supplements that help to bring those down. And that can help with symptoms. It can help with weight loss. There are certain blends that help with cortisol. Of course, we can't just out supplement a stressful life. So we also have to be doing other things, stress management wise. I do like a prenatal or a multivitamin just to kind of fill in the gaps because none of us eat perfectly 100%, myself included. So it's nice to have that insurance policy. There's all different kinds. But I'm not a fan. What I'm not a fan of are the big hormone balance supplements. Like I'll see that a lot. There'll be a supplement called like hormone balance for women, but
that's what I've seen all over the internet right now.
And people will take them and pay crazy amounts of money for them. But it's like, from my perspective, well, what's going on with everyone's so unique. How can you take one, pill that's going to be perfect for everyone's hormones? that's crazy talk. So I try to steer people away from those hormone balance blends and really kind of drill down and figure out, okay, what hormones are you needing to work on? And then how can we give you a more targeted supplement approach from there?
Yes. And so, Cory, do you have more information? I think is on your website when I was having a look there, perhaps about the different options, and maybe if people want more information about the various supplements that would be good, maybe that would be a good place.
Yeah. So I have a whole PCOS supplement line. I have PCOS protein powders as well because we talk a lot about protein and how important that is. But if you go to my website and just the supplement section, my supplement line is called Vitamin PCOS. And it's excellent resource. There's a ton of cool stuff, and each one has a description for what it is and who it's most helpful for.
Awesome. So I assume the journey would maybe be that after they've done the tests with their doctor, they would then know the things that they would be lacking, and then they would be able to get something that was best suited for them.
That's a great way to go about it. If you don't have access to that testing, or you're not, due for new tests or anything like that, you can go through and just pick out what resonates with you in terms of symptoms, right? So if you have facial hair, then you'll know that you'll want to go for something that helps to lower your androgens. So the descriptions on my website help steer you there if you don't have updated lab work.
You got to know if I had the facial hair, you would know.
Right.
Okay. And then actually a question here that I had that we didn't yet touch on when we were talking a bit about the birth control side of things is something I've actually personally wanted to know. So in terms of PCOS, like what the best birth control is. So personally, I had the Mirena for 5 years. I then got a second Mirena, and I was actually fine. And I then got a second Mirena. And I don't know what happened to me, but I was like, I felt so out of touch with myself because most people don't get a period. And I don't know, one day I was just like, I just cannot have this thing anymore. Like, when you're like, am I angry with you because I'm hormonal, or are you just very annoying? I don't know. So I was like, I need to have some kind of cycle. And like now I'm on the pill. But I still feel like, I don't know. I still don't know if it's the best option. But yeah, I would love to get your insight.
Yeah, that's a great question. I wish I had a better packaged, pretty answer. But I think it's kind of figure out what works best for you. There's no one birth control best for PCOS specifically. There are, there's so many options out there for us now. And if you want to go the hormone-free option, you totally can. You can do like a copper IUD. That one can cause heavy cramping and bleeding, which is not fun for a lot of women, but some women are totally okay with that form. So you could try that. You could also do just cycle tracking, which is kind of what I teach in my practice, and using what's called the BBT, basal body temperature thermometer, which basically tracks your temperature and allows you to see when you ovulated, to know when you can have unprotected intercourse and when you cannot. So that's another form that you could look into as well. And that does, it's a little bit more work than just taking a pill or, not paying attention. But it is really cool to understand what's happening with your hormones in real time. And it is kind of empowering as women because we don't get enough of that education in school. And it helps us to kind of connect with our body and say, oh, okay, now I know why I get, these crazy mood swings 3 days before my period or halfway through my cycle. Now I understand why. It's because of this hormone, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So it's a really cool method. And that's something to check out as well. And the cool part about that is that if you do eventually want to have children, you can just switch the mode and you can go, it can kind of serve as a helpful tool to help you try to conceive. So it's a pretty cool one. But really, the pill, the Mirena, the Skyla, Kyleena IUDs, the patch, the NuvaRing, the implant, the Depo-Provera, all of those really can, impact us differently. And that's kind of between those, finding what works best for you. There's no one best for PCOS, unfortunately.
Okay, great. Interesting. Thank you. And I'm definitely going to check that out. I feel like the older I get, like the more in tune, I just feel like I want to be with myself and like what's going on. Because I think when you're younger, it's like you're just out there living your life, like everything is cool. You always have energy. You're always in a good mood. And then as you get older, you're like, hold on. I feel like I need to understand myself a little bit more.
Exactly. I know, exactly. Yeah, and it is cool to be able to do that.
Yeah, I like that.
Yes.
Okay, Cory. So I think just to start wrapping up here, this has been so helpful, and yeah, you've answered so many questions. I think the girls are going to be crazy for all of this. So yeah, I've just got so much clarity walking away from this. So maybe we can just end on like a couple of practical things. So if you were to chat to a girl that was struggling with her hormones, struggling with PCOS, like what are a couple of practical things that she could start doing today or this week that can start impacting her and making her feel better and be able to do all the things that she wants to do?
Yeah. So I think having some kind of movement routine can be so helpful because a lot of us have sedentary jobs. We're sitting down a lot or, we're working from home. So just incorporating in a small movement routine. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. You don't have to be an Olympic athlete to manage your PCOS effectively. If you just fit in like a 30-minute walk or some yoga, or depending on what your goals are, weight loss or not, you could do some elliptical work, you could do some strength training. Just a little bit of movement every day is so helpful for your hormones and your PCOS, especially obviously if you have some weight loss goals. Coffee is another big one. Caffeine, my recommendation generally is 1 cup of coffee per day or less. So that's kind of the general recommendation that I make for women with PCOS. So if you're doing a lot more than that, I would try to work on cutting that down. You can switch to decaf. You could switch to spearmint tea, which is actually helpful for lowering androgens. So if you're somebody who suffers from elevated androgen or testosterone issues like facial or body hair growth or acne, spearmint tea can be really a helpful tool there. So you could do that. Another one, just paying attention to your plate. Do you have vegetables on your plate? Yes or no? If no, add some. Do you have a protein? If no, add some. And then do you have some healthy fats? What's your carb serving? I try to recommend 1 serving of carb on your plate. So that means, if you have an option between pasta with meatballs and a side of corn, and I'm just throwing random stuff out there. If you had
broccoli,
beans, you basically do a little bit of the pasta or the corn or the beans, and pick that 1 serving of carb. What's your serving going to be? And then really focusing on the veggies and the protein. So just take a look at the composition of your meals on your plate, and that's so basic. But just
I think the basics are beautiful, And what I like is like, for nutrition, I'm always like, we're eating anyways, right? So we may as well just make those small tweaks. It's not like a new thing that you're trying to implement. So you can just make some.
I know everybody eats. So
oh my
you just
God,
have to figure out.
Love that your baby is here right now. I do. You are so inspiring. I hope one day when I have a baby that's 7 weeks old, I'm going to be doing an interview with my baby. I love it.
How to do that non-boss life,
You're amazing. You're amazing. I love you even more because of that baby. Well, I guess we are pretty much wrapping up here. My one last question is what is one thing that you wish every woman knew about her hormones?
I think I just ending with how much your hormones impact your life and your body. We don't think about the connection all the time, but it's huge. Your hormones impact your mood, your energy levels, your sleep, your weight, obviously, your fertility. There's just your stress, your ability to come back from stress and resilience from stress. Your hormones impact everything. So if you're not paying attention to them and you have no idea what levels they're at and you have no idea how to improve them if they're out of whack, that's when you need to put in some work, and it's going to make you feel better just overall. It's going to make you feel like a different person. So I think just the power of hormones.
That's so true. Because I guess for a lot of us, we just don't feel great, or we don't have energy, or we're struggling with our weight, and we just like don't know what it is. So yeah, it's just so good to bring an awareness around that could certainly be something that you need to pay attention to. So I think that's a great note to end on. Cory, you are amazing. This was such a fantastic and insightful interview. Thank you so much. And I love how practical it was. I love how real you are. I love that it's stuff that we can go ahead and implement. In our next meal, we're going to do our balanced plates. We're going to get our hormones beautifully balanced as well. And I will reach out to you as well after the interview. And I always like to do like a little practical download afterwards that the girls can grab so that they can have something that they can take away and be like, cool, step 1, 2, 3, this is kind of the next thing that I can do. So I will include that in the link in this interview. So girls, if you're watching this, you can go ahead and grab that. And then don't forget to follow Cory on Instagram, the woman's dietitian. And she has got so much more incredible content and will unpack these topics even more. She has amazing recipes. So definitely worth going to check her out, and her website as well. So that's it. Thank you so much. And we will see you guys back in the next episode of the Lean Girl Session.